Hello everybody, it's Chaz in Omaha here with another build guide for you. This time we have the Spark Charge Runemaster. So we'll go ahead and start off with basic gameplay. First off, you want to have Enchant Weapon up at all times. There's a numlock trick that I'll show you really quickly. If you go into your input keys, you see it was E, and I have it as keypad 4, right? So you want to bind it to a keypad on your right hand side of your keyboard, and then you turn numlock on. You hold the key that you bound it to and then push numlock again, and then it will auto cast it forever until you alt tab or something. And then you pretty much just teleport around. You spam Mana Strike to apply a million spark charges and proc your Frost Claw. And then on big targets, you put down your Glyph of Dominion and you spam Mana Strike. The strengths of this build are it has insanely high ward gen. If I put my glyph down and I stand here and spam like you would on like a boss or something, you can see my ward. It gets insane. Right? It has insanely high ward gen. Another strength is that there are really no types of monsters that this thing's weak against. It's really good at sniping single target things. It's really good at groups. It's really strong at AoE. It's really good at single target. Yeah, it's just strong against all mob types. And then it does also have above average boss DPS. Some of the weaknesses of this build is that you do Giga yourself on bosses, which is fine. It's not a big deal because you can regenerate really quickly, but the reason you need to be aware of that is that it does lock you out of teleporting out of danger, and it keeps you from putting your glyph back down to, you know, like overcap your resists and stuff. Another weakness is that leveling with Mana Strike prior to putting your Enigma offhand on is not recommended. So you probably want to level in a different way until you can put the Enigma on. And then the last weakness is that going into combat, your ward is like a much more reasonable level. So like before you start combat, it's a little weak, but you can just like kind of snipe things from far away and get a bunch of ward before you fight if you're, you know, like in a higher corruption level. Alright, so now we can go ahead and go through the skills. I want to start off by saying that I don't recommend leveling with Mana Strike from the very beginning. I did because I was curious about it, but I think you should probably just go ahead and level with like Lightning Blast and Glacier and Static, at least until 37 when you can put the dagger on, probably even until level 46. Once you put the Enigma on at level 46, then using Mana Strike as your primary is good. So we can start with Mana Strike. The first thing you want to do with Mana Strike is get the Spark Charge application. This is pretty much what makes it really strong to spam, especially early on when you're not going to be proccing the Lightning Blast quite as quickly. After that, go into the attack speed to get this Rune Sap ability. This buff is really, really powerful to stack up, especially when you have really high attack speed. Then after that, I would go down this pathway into the critical rejuvenation. One tip about going down through this pathway, don't put points into these until you can get all the way through here, because this kind of bricks you for a bit if you put it in here and don't have this, yeah? And then eventually you want Star Guide here for the auto target. It's a huge quality of life. And then the last thing is that you just fill out the attack speed and you fill out this critical mana. You don't really need this critical mana until you start using the Glyph Lightning Blast stuff, because that's what ooms you. So next we have Frost Claw. The most important thing on this is to get this Rending Cascade. The base critical chance is kind of the reason why this works so well, particularly in single target, because you need this to crit as close to 100% of the time as possible in order to proc the Lightning Blast from the dagger effect. If you're using Mana Strike, then this Makwahitl is mandatory. If you're not yet using Mana Strike, then you can go to Volley of Glass first. If you start using Frost Claw, like when you first put the dagger on, then you can kind of ignore this and do this first. Other than that, the rest of this isn't really all that important. You pretty much just need this to proc it and then this so it shotguns. Okay, so next we can go ahead and go over Lightning Blast. I would suggest first just going into maxing out Cloud Answer plus Mortal Capacitor, which will make you apply tons of strong spark charges. After that, you probably want to get Lightning Attunement so that you have the Lightning Aegis. And then you probably want to max this out. And then last, you probably want to go into the Conversions thing to augment your boss damage for later in the game when it'll start mattering. Next, we have Enchant Weapon. Now, Enchant Weapon's kind of weird because there's only 9 points in here that really matter, which is the attack speed and the duration. If you don't have set rings or set rings with good shock chance, this can become a little more relevant. I have really high roll in my rings, so I put barely any in this. This efficacy thing matters on bosses to make it free so that when you inevitably yourself for a few seconds, your weapon will still be able to cast because it'll be 0 mana. This chill thing here is just for a bit of defense. It doesn't really matter at all. You can pretty much put points other than these 13 wherever you want. You could even put a point into the automatically recasting node if you don't want to do the numlock thing. Last, we have Glyph of Dominion. Now, the main purpose of Glyph of Dominion is this node right here, Tendrils of the Invoker. This makes your single target much, much, much higher. However, this glyph doesn't really function very well until you have Doomscribe. So I would honestly, when you're starting to fill this in, I would go right over to Doomscribe to fill it in, and then go for either defense or this, just depending on what you want. But Glyph of Dominion feels really bad to use without Doomscribe maxed out. I would note that I made it fire so I can see it. The lightning one is really hard to see, especially on specific tile sets. I highly recommend you just make it fire for visual purposes because it doesn't really do any meaningful damage. And then the last thing I will point out is that you have Runic Invocation on your bar in place of, Lightning Blast and Frostclaw. You just need it on your bar because you need the runes. You don't ever push it unless you feel like it for some reason. And then you have unspec'd Teleport. Teleport does apply spark charges, so you can teleport in the middle mobs. It doesn't work on dummies, but you can do that, and it'll blow them up. It's kind of fun. Okay, so next we can go ahead and go over the gear. There's only 2 items that are actually mandatory for this spec. First being Dragorath's Claw. This is what allows Frostclaw to proc Lightning Blast up to 3 passes per second. So this is really important. The build doesn't function at all without this, and it also makes capping Lightning Blast crit insanely trivial. Next we have the Enigma. Without this, your spark charges are trash. So spark charges are trash without this offhand. These rings are not mandatory. However, you have really low flat spell damage without them. So I really, really recommend you wear 2 of them. Not only that, they also contribute a bunch of ward generation to you. And they're also like the easiest source of reliable shock. As far as general stats, you really want an attack speed base neck and attack speed on your gloves. Attack speed is really massive on this build. You can feel it dramatically if you have like low uptime on Enchant Weapon or whenever it falls off, or if you just have generally a low attack speed. You want to stack all of the int that you possibly can because it scales really well because of the Enigma. Plus it gives you a ton of crits chance to crit cap your Frostclaw because of the first 5 points in the Sork tree. If you have 80 int and 46% CDR total on worn gear, you can actually get your Enchant Weapon to have 100% uptime. It's not mandatory by any means, but those few seconds of downtime that you'll have when you don't have enough CDR is quite noticeable. For idols, this lightning critical strike chance thing is really strong. Ward per second is really good for keeping you from getting killed before you engage in combat to generate all your ward. And other than that, that chance to apply a spark charge on melee hit is also pretty good. In order for you to crit cap your Frostclaw, assuming you have a 4% Dragorath's Claw, you need approximately 490% increased between passives and gear. So that's your target. Alright, so now we can just go ahead and go over the passives. I will attempt to suggest a path through the passives, but please forgive me if I say something that doesn't quite work out right, because I leveled with Mana Strike just to do it, and I kind of recommend you don't do that, and I'm going to try and make suggestions based on either one, but I might have done it wrong, because it's a little confusing to try and write both paths at the same time. Anyways, so you start with 8 here, and then you fill 1 into these just to get it over here. If you're planning on putting this in later to get a little bit more defense, then you need this. Otherwise, you could just put this extra point here or here. It doesn't really matter. Once you get to 10, you definitely want the attack speed here. And then you put 5 in here right at the beginning, stop at 20. So then you don't go to the Runemaster tree right away. I know that sounds like madness because you're a Runemaster, but these 5 points are so ridiculously powerful, I recommend you get these 5 first. So then after you're done with the Sork tree, if you happen to be a Masochist and are leveling with Mana Strike, I suggest that you go right into the Spellblade tree now until you can get Enchant Weapon, because the attack speed is really, really crazy. Otherwise, you can go ahead and go right into Runemaster. This Unsealed Mana, you really want more of this if you're leveling with Lightning Blast instead of Mana Strike. Otherwise, you just put 1 in each of these 2 just because you have to in order to get to these 2 powerful nodes. Then you can just put your points into this Sphere of Protection. You could also put some into Runeward Cataclysm instead of Sphere of Protection because the crit chance is quite strong. And then eventually, once you get the Enigma put on and you definitely hard swap over to Mana Strike, I would suggest you get points up to Enchant Weapon as fast as you can because it's just that strong for the build. Other than that, you basically just kind of fill this tree up because there's really only one pathway, yeah? That's pretty much it for the passives, and now I'm going to go ahead and show you some clips of echoes so you can see what the build is like in practice. Thank you, have a good one. Okay, we try again. We try again! Give us a good armor roll, please and thank you. Ah! Giant boulders of death.
You will be snuffed out.
You will be snuffed out. I really like the voice lines on this boss, guys. See you later, Mana.
Flames consume you. Burn to ash.
Oh, wow, they're just like staying together. This boss with the multi-shot character is hilarious right now. Wow, they got slapped that time. I just don't think that Surge is a thing that I'm gonna do for... I don't know, I've done it already and it's kind of okay. It's kind of okay. I'd rather play the bear if I was gonna play that style of build. Although with the Spark Charge being good now, I bet the Surge build... The Surge build is probably kind of amazing now that I think about it. Yeah, the Surge build is probably like way better than it used to be. Because you could just kill trash. You could kill weak trash just with the Spark Charges off your Firebrand. And then you just save the Surge big hit like forever until you see a big guy and then Omega one-shot them. Has anybody played Surge Spark Charge since they buffed Spark Charge to like scale properly with the Enigma? It's gotta be a good build. It's gotta be a good build. Wait, but you can't get... You know the problem with it though is that you can't get the Edict of the Scion thing with Firebrand. Because you can't use Firebrand as a Runemaster. That's kind of the problem with that build. If you could get Edict of the Scion to proc with Firebrand... Because it's an area skill, right? Probably. Does it count as an area skill? I'm not sure. It would get... Like, it would get almost as much ward as this if you could. And honestly, your boss damage with Surge is probably a little higher than this build. Surge's boss damage can get pretty nutty. What else would a big red X mean? Good lord. Good lord, sir. It was sync issues. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so connection issues. Did you ask him? Did you say, what do you think it means? You don't even say it in a condescending voice. Just be like, what do you think it means? Have you tried hovering your mouse over said X? Have you tried turning your monitor on? Have you tried turning the computer power on? Just a thought. Have you tried churning your chair so you're facing the right direction? I hate OneDrive. I kind of hate it too. Mostly because it just like tries to do stuff automatically all the time. And it annoys me. The concept of it is good though. OneDrive is good. OneDrive is good from a corporate standpoint though, because you can auto backup like personnel that have important files on their computer automatically. Right? From like a corporate security and like redundancy standpoint, OneDrive is quite powerful. Do you guys, is that what you guys do with it, Heaton? You do it for like file redundancy on people's PCs, so like that they can't lose their data even if their computer explodes? That's what I would use it for. If I was CIO or some person that was making decisions like that.